Well, here it is. One of the weirdest weeks for Tottenham Hotspur. Certainly probably the weirdest week this millennium. Back in 1999, Tottenham went to Old Trafford to play Manchester United on the last day of the season. And we knew that if we got a result there, if we beat Manchester United, Arsenal would win the Premier League. And then to make it worse, Les Ferdinand in the 24th minute scored an incredible lob over Peter Schmeichel to put Spurs 1-0 up. I wasn't in the away end that day, but I spoke to a man yesterday who was, and he said everybody booed. That is what it's going to be like tomorrow night at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium when we play Manchester City, knowing that if we get a result against them, Arsenal are nailed on to win the Premier League. It's a weird week, and a lot of it for me will depend on what happens tonight, Monday night, Aston Villa against Liverpool. If Aston Villa win that game, potentially even get a draw, then I think they're pretty much nailed on for that Champions League spot for fourth place, and therefore Tottenham will not really have anything to play for going into that Man City game. But if Liverpool turn over Aston Villa, and Aston Villa have to go to Crystal Palace on the last day, then for me there is no way that Ange Postecoglou doesn't say to his Spurs men tomorrow night, you have to go out there and give it full metal jacket. To be honest, knowing Ange as I do, I think he might do that anyway. I don't think there's any possible way he can say to his team, don't give it your all. Anyway, I'll get more into that in this episode of the Spurred On podcast. Guys, for regular listeners and watchers, apologies. I had illness last week. I was very sick and therefore wasn't able to do either a match preview or any of my regular formats last week. So apologies for that, but I'm on the way back now and intrigued as to what happens this week. Please do drop this video a like, and if you're watching on YouTube, please do go over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. Give me a follow or a subscribe there, and of course do, if you want to become a Spurred On Pro or Patreon member, all the details in the description box. Only £1 a month and really helps me to make this regular content for you. But before we get more into tomorrow night's game and the rest of the week, I want to talk about Burnley, because as I said, I wasn't able to do a preview or a review of the game last week. I did watch the game from my bed. Overall, stressful, very stressful game. I thought Spurs were poor, to be honest. I'll go into it more a little half by half because I made kind of lots of notes. Starting with the first half, just again, not a lot of what I say is going to be new because it's just a commonality of this season for Spurs, certainly the second half of this season, but the front three were just not clicking in any way whatsoever. Just a huge lack of confidence amongst them, really. And a lot of people have been asking for Decky Kulusevski to start on the left, but because he'd be able to get past his man and whip a cross in. It's not his game, you know, and I love Kulusevski, I really do, but he's had a poor last few weeks, to say the least, and he was poor again at the weekend, and it wasn't actually till the second half where he swapped back to the right where it looked like kind of Tottenham finally had kind of square pegs in square holes, or round pegs in round holes, whichever way you say that phrase. The other thing I noticed a lot in that first half against Burnley, again, players jogging back. I don't want to only pick on Bissouma, but he's an incredibly laissez-faire defensive recovery runner. He gets caught up the pitch too much, and then he does not put it in to chase back. He really doesn't. And it wasn't actually him directly at fault for the Burnley goal, but what did happen in that Burnley goal is 3 Tottenham players dived off their feet to try and win the ball. That kind of overexcitement of the initial press that I know Ange wants us to do, but sure, press, but you can't dive off your feet because then you are completely out of the game. It was Johnson and Porro certainly were 2 of the 3 players who did it. I think Sarr was the 3rd, and they were out of the game, and that's why the midfield was completely open, and therefore it just took one good pass and they were in behind our left back Oliver Skipp, who I think actually Oliver Skipp did really well. Honestly, he will give us kind of 6.5, 7 out of 10, certainly in terms of effort playing in that left back role, and it would not surprise me, and I know this is going to upset a lot of you because of what happened in the last 15 minutes, but it would not surprise me at all if Skipp starts at left back again against Man City tomorrow night. And said in his post-match press conference, because of the lack of game time Skipp has had, he wasn't ever going to be able to play more than 60 minutes, and that's why he was able to then bring on Van der Ven to play left back for the first time in that kind of last 15-minute period. Another thing I really noticed in that first half against Burnley, which was I was actually shouting at the TV at times, Heung-min Son, obviously love him, legend of the club. But mate, you are not Harry Kane, by which I mean you are not a player who can comfortably get on the ball in your own half, or even really in the 10 position. But he was coming into his own half time and time again in that first half, and I was screaming at the television. It was so frustrating because it leaves such a huge gap in that 9 position. Now, I do have to caveat that by saying one of the times I was screaming at him for doing it, he dropped into his own half, picked up the ball, made some space, passed it on, and then that ended up at Porro's feet, and he ended up slamming it into the roof of the net, and we got that equaliser. But for me, that time was an outlier rather than a reason why we should continue with that happening. It's not his game. He's not a good enough passer, I'm afraid. He's not a comfortable enough player on the ball like Kane was to really maximise that. And the other thing is, Sonny, he doesn't then, when he comes deep, he doesn't bust a gut to make that late run into the box. A lot of the time when we get out wide and he's come deep, the ball comes in and Sonny's still outside the box. So if you can't do both, then you can't be doing it. And Kane was really kind of elite at doing both. I've mentioned the front three not clicking. I would say that the decision-making amongst the front three and most of our side in that first half was poor. But Brennan Johnson especially was making some bad decisions, in my opinion. Going for goal when he should have cut it back on at least a couple of occasions. And I really rate him. I think he's going to be a player who, as he realises his importance to the squad, and maybe as some players get moved out this summer, Johnson will kind of grow in confidence, and he has all of the talent and all of the skills to become a really important player for Spurs. But just at the moment, the decision-making means that we are missing out on chances, and we certainly did in that first half. Now, going into the second half of that Burnley game, it was certainly better. Moving, like I said, Kulusevski to the right enabled us to be more comfortable on the ball throughout the positions, even though he didn't have a good match himself. But there were still, weaknesses to be found. We're still not attacking defensive corners at all. We're not attacking that first ball. So depressing. There's, one time when Burnley had one free header from the corner and then it went out wide, and then they got another cross in which we chose not to try and block because we don't really like to try and block crosses. And then they had another free header. The other centre-back of theirs had another free header at the back post again. So that was depressing. I thought James Maddison, who had, in my opinion, an appalling first half, really did improve in that second half. And I think that kind of run that he made for himself, where he skipped past a player and then facing up the Burnley defenders at about 16, 15 yards out, he beat the last man on the left and then had a shot which he didn't quite get hold of. But I thought that gave him the confidence to have a bit more zip to his play. But overall, he's still lacking a rhythm for me. And I think, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I hope Southgate doesn't take him to the Euros. I really do. And I hope he's able. It'll be upsetting for him, of course it will. But I want him to have some genuine time off, rest his legs, rest his ankle. That injury, I think, is still not quite all there. And hopefully can come back in the pre-season and have some real zip and real rhythm, because we miss him. We miss him at his best, that's for sure. Then we come to the subs, which did make a difference. I want to give some credit to Dane Scarlett, actually. I thought Dane Scarlett showed in about 15 minutes more hold-up play, like impressive hold-up play, back to goal, winning free kicks, holding it up and bringing other players into play than we've seen certainly from Sonny this season. He's not a number 9 in terms of back to goal play, Sonny. He brings a lot to the table, but that's not one of them, and I thought Scarlett was good at that. So that was impressive. He has filled out a bit in the last few years, and he is a better player back to goal than I'd seen him previously in some of the friendlies I've seen him at. And I think a lot of that will come from his kind of loan spells he's had out in kind of League One, where you do have to hold the ball up because you're being hit in the back by big kind of rugged League One centre-backs all the time. And then finally, obviously, got to talk about Mickey van der Ven's goal. Unbelievable finish. And what I was most impressed about that finish actually wasn't just the technique of it, but just it felt like he was like, I've got to take this game by the scruff of the neck because nobody else is going to do it. It's almost like Mickey is the only player who has the confidence at the moment, maybe alongside Romero actually, to just be like, well, no one else is going to do it because they're all so shaky at the moment on the ball. They're so scared of making big decisions and getting them wrong. So Van der Ven was like, give it to me. I'll take a touch. I'll open my body out and bend it into the far corner. Beautiful goal. Fantastic celebration. What a player. Sign him up. Give him a 10-year contract. That's what I'm saying. And then, this might be a bit controversial, but I thought Burnley should have had a penalty. Honestly, the Son clip. Now, a lot of it's been played on, Twitter and Instagram and stuff, and they're saying, oh, he dived. But that's because the replay isn't going far back enough. If you look at Son, I think it's maybe his knee catches the back of his leg, and similar to actually what happened at Brentford on the opening game, where Son kind of tried to come back and help and actually, gave away a penalty. And I think we got away with one there. I think that's the kind of one that at an away ground you wouldn't get. So we were quite fortunate there. But overall, poor performance, but we got the win, and that's kind of all that matters. Now, moving on to the Man City game tomorrow night. Like I said, I think a lot depends on how Aston Villa do at home to Liverpool tonight. I think they will win tonight. Liverpool have nothing to play for. I think Liverpool will be thinking more like about their last home game, where they'll give a big goodbye to Klopp. And I think this will be a huge night, Holt End at Villa tonight. Get them in the Champions League, first time at the top table for decades. And if they do win tonight and they get fourth place, they deserve it. They really do. Spurs dropped off. I think Spurs are better than Villa. I do, but only when we're playing at our best, and we haven't been at our best for a long time. However, if Villa do not win tonight, if they lose to Liverpool, then I think tomorrow night against Man City, I think Spurs will go for it properly in the first half. I think Ange will just be like, go out, enjoy it. And I think actually that pressure being off Spurs, knowing that if we lose, the fans won't mind, I think we'd probably play pretty well. I can really envisage that. Now, look, Man City are in unbelievable form, but they're not like Arsenal. Arsenal are in this unbelievable form where they are attacking everyone. They're really getting after everybody. At Old Trafford, when they came to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, they're really front foot. City are just more like, yeah, we play the City way. And I think Spurs will have high tempo. And I'm intrigued to see, if and when that happens tomorrow night in the first half, how the fans will react in the stadium. It's going to be mad. Because if Villa have lost and we were to go 1-0 up against Man City, there will be a lot of people who will be very upset at the thought of us giving it to Arsenal. But also, Villa go to Crystal Palace on the last day, and nobody wants to go to Crystal Palace at the moment. They're playing unbelievably well. And Villa might lose at Crystal Palace on the last day, which would mean if we beat Sheffield United and beat Man City, we're in the Champions League. So it is a difficult one. My personal opinion is I don't want Arsenal to win the league. I live in London. Over the last 18 months, all the Arsenal fans suddenly come out of the cracks, got their shirts on, suddenly believing, and Arsenal fans are just unbelievably hard to deal with. They just have this weird entitlement, and I don't want it to happen. But it is a difficult one. I think what will happen is, even if we were to go 1-0 up in the first half tomorrow, I think Spurs players would automatically, almost unsaid, I don't think Ange would have to say anything, but I think they would automatically drop off 5 to 7 to 8% in that second half, and Man City would do enough to win it 2-1, something like that. But it is going to be fascinating, and I have to say, I'm kind of hoping that Villa win tonight. It's a weird one, I know it is, but like I said, so difficult. Arsenal fans are just awful. Guys, let me know in the comments what you think, what you want to happen this week and what you think will happen this week. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Again, apologies for being away last week because it just wasn't well enough to do this. But I'm back now, feeling somewhere near, 100%, and intrigued to see what's going to happen. Please do drop the video a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. Really appreciate all your support. Go over to the podcast platforms, give me a little follow, a subscribe, and a rating there. And like I said, if you want to become a Spurred On Pro or Patreon member, only £1 a month. All the details in the description box. Most importantly, come on you Spurs.